What is your FCK this? I'm out moment. Had been telling my boss that there was an error on the website that I cannot fix because I don't have the permissions. I mentioned this several times to him. It would take him one phone call to get it straightened out. BTW. The owner notices this error. Not only calls me out in front of the whole department about not caring about my job and taking advantage of his kindness, but also makes it a point to tell me I should thank my boss for having my back. It was the last straw placed on a huge pile of awfulness. I quit the next day. And that's why you tell your boss through email ticketing system only. I don't douche tea without paper trail. I was checking my trail camera for my master's thesis. Where I had them there was nothing too big, just coyotes and bobcats. There was always rumors of a mountain lion but not much credit to them. Well, I was walking to one of my trail cameras that was placed under a big oak. As I walk, I hear the branches snap and a dead deer falls from the tree and hits the ground. I decided to stop my field work and head on home. My other story was again me checking cameras, but this time around I knew mountain lions were around. If only they ever show up on camera it would be great. I was checking one of them as it was getting dark when I heard a lion call from my left, followed by a lion responding on my right. I was 15 working at a gas station. I wasn't scheduled to work that day and my sister was in town. I hadn't seen her for about a year. Boss called and said someone called in sick and he needs me to come into work. In the past I had been very accommodating as it was about a block from my house and easy for me to get there fast. This time I told him I couldn't come in that day because of my sister being in from out of town. I'll always remember this. He says, what's more important? Your sister or your job? FCK this. I'm out. Posted this last time. Was in Phoenix on vacation and went out with my cousin. She takes me to a party on the 3rd floor of an apartment. Probably 30 people. Some girl shows up and there is some drama with some other guys not at the party. They say they're coming over to the party and there is going to be a fight. 2 of the guys at the party go to their cars, grab guns and an ammo box full of ammo. There's only one way out of this apartment and I'm not going to be there if this goes down. Look at my cousin. I don't know any of these mother effers and I'm heading home tomorrow. Can we get the FCK out of here? My friends and I were hiking in a secluded area in Maine one summer. Just messing around and making a lot of noise. We stumbled upon what looked like an abandoned campsite. Trash everywhere. And a desk chair set on some rocks. We took a lot of the trash and the chair with us. We were wheeling the chair down the path when we saw a stream off to the left. And wandered over to it. We spent probably 5 minutes looking at the stream. When we returned to the path the chair was gone. We hadn't heard anything. We left very quickly. Sounds like you found a homeless or a hermit person's campsite. Which happens a lot here. Went to a friend's birthday party at his favorite club. Found out he not only invited my abusive ex, but also paid for her train ticket to come up and see him. One of my good friends let me know that she was there. And the friend I rode with was like, nope. FCK this. We're out. And we went back home. When a co-worker violently punched a dent into a freezer when I told him to shut up. After months of him harassing me. And I was reprimanded. The director got a nice report after that. And he was fired 2 weeks later. When my old boss told me that they would not be reporting a sexual assault on campus to the police. It was a private high school. I reported it myself and gave my 2 weeks that afternoon. Edit. Guys. This was years ago. I dealt with it how I dealt with it. I was going through some personal trauma at the time. I ended up in the hospital after I gave my 2 weeks but before I left. And the same boss told other faculty members why it was very personal, and I did the best I could. I consulted an attorney who gave me all of my options. I took the quickest one out. I scuba dive a lot in Key Largo where reef sharks are common. Reef sharks are small for sharks and mostly scavengers, not aggressive. One day I lucked into a naturally occurring baited shark dive. There were 7 sharks in a holding pattern waiting for a snapper which was bitten and hiding. I was excitedly in the middle, getting some nice pictures. I noticed a couple of them acting a bit squilly, but wasn't too fussed about it. As one of the larger ones took its patterned route past me, it suddenly did a 180 and charged me. Man, it's easy to forget how fast and powerful they are when they want to be. I held up my camera rig to fend it off, but it made a hard turn at the last moment. Only its pectoral fin actually touched. I was very much FCK this. I'm out at that point and went to watch from the top of the reef with other divers. I learned a couple of things though. How to better distinguish between reef sharks and small bull sharks, and that just being present around potential food sources considered provoking them. You should get me and my sister pregnant at the same time so that they will be cousins and siblings at the same time. Crazy outweighed the hot on that one. Her identical twin sister was also a bit touched. Worked as a bartender waiter in a busy city center pub. We had been getting slammed all morning. Short-staffed probably. It was hell. Just as we had caught up, I took 20 seconds to grab a drink and chat to one of my favorite regulars. Just then, my new area manager walked in, spotted me, berated me for standing around doing nothing. I tried to explain how busy it had been, but he didn't care. I got my first disciplinary in 4 years off the back of it. I was pissed and handed my notice in the next day. Cutco. A friend and I went to go interview for a summer job that some random guy invited us to on our college campus. 5 minutes in we realized something about this interview was off. Who does group interviews anyways? But we were too non-confrontational to do anything about it. 10 minutes after that. After the "we're not a pyramid scheme, we're just a vertical marketing spiel," someone got up and left. And we followed. FCK MLMs. I got denied a 2 or 3% merit increase, cost of living inflation increase, at my company despite them being a leader in the market and making money hand over fist. I was in a meeting with my boss's boss and he got an email about the merit increase for one of my peers. He was already making about 75% more money than I was, and got an increase. I immediately changed my status on LinkedIn and started getting bombarded with opportunities. I start a new job on the 2nd of January. Montgomery. L. 2 years ago, driving down south with my girlfriend. 3 AM gas stop while she's asleep. Walk into prepay. As I walk out, see a huddle of crackheads taking hits and handing their money to their pimp who's dressed in the whole 70s era pimp suit. Feathered hat and cane and all. They all FCK for just 20 bones, my man. I've never been back to Alabama. Similar to an unkindness of ravens or a murder of crows. A group of crackheads is called a resentment. You saw a resentment of crackheads taking hits and handing money to their pimp. Edit. You two sucks. I was transporting an LVAD patient to a doctor's appointment. She had some depression issues. She stops getting ready. Says, "You know what? I think I'm done." She unplugs her LVAD and starts yelling at everybody in the room. For those unaware, LVAD is an electrical pump device for end-stage heart failure. Now when you unplug them, there is a 15-minute battery on the actual unit. When that fails, it could be minutes or the patient might not go at all. Luckily for me, I was the least qualified in the room of nurses and a doc. So I just quietly left. Was married for 14 years to a not nice to me man. We had 2 children he basically ignored. One day our 4-year-old daughter crawled into his lap for a hug. He threw her on the floor. Less than 6 months later. Money saved. Belongings packed, and I was out of there with the kids. Even though he told me I wouldn't be able to make it without him. Never looked back. When my college professor required us to sign up for a class at a different college and pay full price to get credit for his class, I said FCK this and dropped out. That sounds horrendously illegal. The night a guy I dated for years ran through the front door of our apartment sideways, yelling, Honey, I know you don't approve of hard drugs, but I just smoked crack and it was awesome. Honey, I know you don't approve of hard drugs, but I just smoked crack and it was awesome. Asterisk. This sounds like the opening line of a stand-up routine. You got a belly laugh out of me. Colon. I was on a job interview for a dog daycare boarding kennel. It was very old-fashioned and had been there for 50+ years. For those who don't know, old school dog training is basically just abusing the dog into obedience. Anyway, the dude interviewing me was asking me how I would call over a dog that was across the yard, get their attention. I forget what my response was, but he said he throws a Kong at them. At first I thought he meant like threw it near them or against the fence to get their attention. But no. He meant he actually pelted the dogs with the Kong. For those who don't know, Kongs are heavy dog toys made from thick rubber that really hurt if dropped or thrown at you from even a short distance. I was horrified. Needless to say, I didn't accept the job there. Did you report them for animal abuse? Went to a borderline abandoned mall in my town and started exploring one of the abandoned restaurants. Got inside. Walked into the back where it was dark. Noticed the words "Get Out" written in red on the wall. Turned around and walked straight out. Edit. This was at one of my friend's birthday party, which he held at the last thing open at the mall. A really cool arcade place. But since the rest of the mall was abandoned, we all ran around and did stupid things. And to make it better, we were all eating from a massive tub of sour gummy worms that my friend had found, unopened, in a dumpster. So honestly, the fact that we chose to walk out while high on sugar was probably a miracle. Professor said that nobody ever gets an A in my class. A couple of months ago I was at Oak Point Park in Dallas, Texas late evening, and I thought I heard a kitty mewing in the woods, so I went into the woods to find it just in case it was someone's pet. I got pretty close to where the sound was originating from and it stopped. I waited a couple of minutes and didn't hear anything, and then I took a piss and was about to head back. While I was draining the lizard, I got a really horrible feeling and I noticed out of my peripheral vision some figure watching me from about 20 feet away in a clearing of dead fallen trees. I turned towards him and in the dim light I noticed he was at least half naked and very disheveled. He then meowed at me and I took off, still pissing the opposite direction. He was catcalling. I am ashamed. I'm sorry. When my emotionally abusive ex started threatening physical violence against our less than a year old child for things like crying or touching stuff. Few years back I had a job interview agreed on for a specific time, but when I showed up it became clear that the company had scheduled multiple interviews with multiple applicants at the same exact time. That wouldn't have been a problem itself, but there was only 2 interviewers who both spoke to people one at a time, so by my estimate I could have been forced to wait over an hour for my interview. There was no specific queue, even though I had agreed on a specific time with the recruiter. So I left pretty much instantly, because if the company doesn't care that they're wasting the applicant's time like this, then I was afraid what kind of employer they would turn out to be. Nearly 18 years ago on New Year's Eve, my friends and I were all tripping on shrooms, when one suddenly had the great idea to call up a friend of his that he knew I liked and invite her over. She said sure if she could bring her friend. I believed, not knowing we were tripping. And I was already thinking about napping out, considering I was pretty damned high and didn't want to make an idiot of myself in front of her. So we took a walkabout to meet her halfway, which ended up being right in front of a police station. Bad enough. Then as we got closer, we realized it wasn't her, but her underage 15-year-old sister, WTF, and 14-year-old friend, who my buddy was actually talking to on the phone without realizing. Nope. I kept walking right to the train station and went home. On the plus side, I did end up getting together with the girl I liked, and we've been married 15 years. Her sister still insists my friend knew it was actually her on the phone. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. Dude was a perv. A couple years ago I was working as a stock boy in a grocery store. They FK'd up my schedule and put me working while I had class, even after submitting my schedule 3 times. After not coming into work, They suspended me and said that I would have to talk to my boss. I said FCK it and left. Never went back to work there. Edit. Obligatory thanks for making this my top post. After this job, I ended up doing some computer repair and now I am moving on to consulting. If you're stuck at a TTY job, there is always another one just waiting for you to apply for it. Fight broke out in front of me in a restaurant. Can I please get a waffle? My ex-wife. She was a drunk and away at training to be a flight attendant. Spent ridiculous amounts of money on getting wasted as often as possible. One night we're on the phone. Argument ensues because she's drunk. And she says, "I'm tired of you. You don't do tea for me." So I hung up. Called AT&T. Cancelled her cell phone. Called State Farm and cancelled the insurance on her car. Took all her tea out of my house and stuffed it in her car. Called her parents to come get her car and told them I was done. The guy who never did tea for her, except pay for literally everything, actually stopped doing tea. In the end, like 3 months later she got fired for failing to show up to work because, well, she was drunk. Edit. Story conclusion. After being fired she called me, admitted the problem, and we had a nice long talk. But it was the end for me. We both happily moved on. And from what I understand she got control of her drinking eventually and is doing well. I worked at a factory for a month. And not only was I absolutely miserable, the work was hard and we couldn't sit for our 8-hour shift. And we were only allowed a 15-minute lunch. No breaks. Sometimes I had to come in at 4 rather than 6 to catch up on our orders. I hopped out of there. The owner of a restaurant I worked at offered me $200 to remove an evicted tenant's old furniture and belongings from an apartment he rented out. He had a dumpster delivered and gave me the key. Semicolon. He failed to disclose that the evicted tenant was a hoarder. Semicolon. I almost left when I first opened the door. Semicolon. The place stunk like cat piss, rotten food, and cigarettes. It had stacks of junk electronics, old magazines, food and drink containers, and containers full of cigarette butts. Semicolon. I finally noped the FCK out when I went into the bathroom, which was full of swollen Diet Coke bottles filled with urine and plastic grocery bags full of tea. I never made it to the bedrooms. Semicolon. Semicolon. This happened years ago while working at a Safeway in the produce department. I worked from 1:30 p.m. 10 p.m. 3 days a week. After 4 p.m. I was alone in the department, and as it got later in the evening I would spend my time helping the night manager with his duties because everything in my area was handled. I would help check when needed, stock other departments and clean the warehouse, all while keeping my department perfect. I asked the store manager for more hours after about 2 months of doing this extra work, and she told me if you worked harder I would consider it. So I turned around, clocked out and never came back. Was managing a popular fast food joint, and when I was about to receive my quarterly performance bonus, usually about $5K, we received word from HQ that bonuses were going to be based on performance compared to the year prior. Well, a few months before I transferred to that store, new strip mall opened across the street that had about 5 restaurants in ITC, including 2 direct competitors. Even with that in mind and the new store sheen having worn off, we were still only down about 5%. But because we were still technically down, we didn't receive our bonuses. I started job hunting that Monday. Interviewed Wednesday. Hired Friday for a much better job in a field I actually liked. Didn't make any drama about it. But they had to scramble to find a new qualified person for my position. When you have people working odd schedules 60 hours a week, don't screw with their bonuses for reasons beyond their control on short notice. My psychiatrist of 5+ years told me I should be grateful for my pedophile mother because mothers in the Holocaust shielded their children from bullets. Horribly sad, but not something you tell your patient when they're trying to open up and get help. I told her she was a horrible woman and walked out. I was recently at an open mic night, music not comedy, and the band on stage sounded like they had held a contest across all guitar centers nationwide to find the loudest, least cohesive musicians that they could find. I tried to tough it out and play bass just to get some playing time in. But the guy running sound wouldn't fix where I was in the mix. My rig has me going straight into the PA. And I could literally only hear the bottom 2 strings on my bass. After a while I just sat down to spectate. But the loudness and shtiness just escalated until I was forced to chug my beer and pack up. Never again for that open mic. Yeesh.